Okay, let's dive into something that sounds a bit strange at first glance today.
Yeah.
We're looking at an essay from our source material, and it's got this really provocative title, The Art of Mindlessness.
Hmm.
Now, straight away, that title catches you, doesn't it? Mindlessness usually means, the exact opposite of what we aim for, like presence or awareness.
Yeah, absolutely does. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the source actually leans right into that. They know it's paradoxical. They make it super clear right up front that they're not talking about being like genuinely out of it or unconscious.
Oh, okay.
The title is definitely a deliberate play on words.
Right, so they clear that up quickly. Good. So the core idea then is that real presence, according to this source anyway, means going beyond the limits of just the thinking mind, not ditching consciousness, but
Yeah.
maybe transcending a certain kind of thinking.
Exactly. That's the key distinction. And this deep dive, it's really going to explore the source's pretty sharp critique of how our culture right now deals with thought and reason and connection. It's basically a call to embrace the unknown and also what they call the heart. They're suggesting these things are maybe more key to real connection than just constant mental breakdown of everything.
Okay, so our mission today is to unpack why this source thinks we need to go beyond the mind. What does that actually mean for, how you navigate information or your relationships? And how does this whole idea connect back to feeling more present? Let's see what this essay tells us about this really interesting idea.
Yeah, that title really is the hook, isn't it? The Art of Mindlessness. It just makes you pause and wonder, well, how could that be a good thing? It's definitely designed to, challenge how we usually think about being mindful or present.
And like you said, like clarify right away, it's not about switching off your brain. They're talking about transcending the mind, specifically that constant chatterbox, the analytical judging part.
Yes, exactly, in a very specific way, which importantly doesn't mean they dismiss being conscious. The source is really clear about the value of, standard mindfulness, being aware, being present, being really immersed in something. They say that's crucial.
Okay, so being present, being aware, that's still fundamental. Good. But then they add this other layer, which seems pretty critical. They argue that a lot of genuine presence actually comes from how we manage to get beyond the mind itself. How do we stop just thinking about being present and actually be it?
Precisely, yeah. The source's main critique here is that our culture has gotten maybe a bit too obsessed with what we think about absolutely everything.
Hmm. And the knock-on effect they point out is, well, reason is vital, obviously, but relying only on constant thought can sometimes make us ignore our gut feelings, our instincts, desires, even simple pleasures. We start chasing expectations or what the source calls normalcy instead.
Yes, exactly. And the source uses this really vivid language here. They say, trying to force the fluid, natural, untamable reality of a human soul into these neat mental boxes, well, that just leads to suffering.
Wow, trying to cage something wild. That really paints a picture. And they seem to connect this internal struggle, this difficulty with our own soul, to a wider issue. They call humanity a disconnected species.
Right. Which is kind of ironic, isn't it? With all our amazing technology meant to connect us, the source argues our actual, like, human-to-human connection isn't anywhere near as healthy or natural as it could be.
And they see it in our everyday conversations, right?
Right.
Our focus tends to be on man-made means, like what they call focusing on what man can do instead of maybe exploring what man is.
Exactly. And they link this to other shifts, like maybe moving away from traditional religion, where things like faith or trust get kind of unfairly labeled as ignorance instead of seeing them as maybe a different kind of knowing. The source calls it spiritual intelligence. The feeling is we just don't value the messy reality of being human, the part that's interpretive, unknown, maybe even spiritual.
And is that because we can't measure it or agree on it or know it for sure?
That's exactly what the source suggests, yeah.
Hmm.
So instead of leaning into that fundamental unknownness about ourselves and, life itself, we tend to just sort of deny it matters
Mm-hmm.
or deny it exists.
Okay. And what are the consequences then of living like this? Always thinking, focusing on the known, pushing away the unknown. The source has that really sharp line. What we think, we become.
That hits hard, doesn't it? It's profound. The source basically argues we're burning way too much mental energy thinking about stuff that, in the grand scheme of things, might not matter much. And while we're doing that, we're not making space for uncertainty or discomfort or those big unknowns, which, ironically, are often where the best things come from, right? The things that are maybe, as they say, larger than our mind's comprehension.
And they have a specific term for this, incessant mindfulness. But they're careful to say it's not meditation they mean. It's more like constantly processing everything psychologically.
That's it. Yeah, the constant need to label everything, categorize it, define it, put it in a box.
Okay, and the result of that is we only get comfortable with what fits in our boxes, what we already know. And we automatically push away anything or anyone that doesn't fit those neat definitions.
Exactly. Which, the source argues, leaves basically zero real room for accepting people or ideas that are genuinely different from our own little mental map.
And this obviously affects how we treat each other. They suggest we kind of dodge responsibility by putting other people down, like saying their feelings or ideas are wrong just so we feel better or more certain.
Yeah, and this is where the source gets really critical of modern culture. They literally say culture makes a commodity out of ripping each other apart,
Mm-hmm.
which is quite a statement.
Mm-hmm.
And they add that this whole dynamic only works because, well, we buy into it.
We actually participate. We get some weird comfort from seeing other people fail or thinking they're not as good as us. We mentally put them beneath us.
Right. But the source warns that this whole judging, labeling thing, it ultimately means we're just caging ourselves. And maybe the most striking part of this whole argument, they say we inevitably fall into doing the very things we once condemned in others. We fall within what we once said was wrong. Why?
Because we're human, flawed and messy and uncertain.
Precisely. Because we're human. And they call this dangerous territory for a mind that's become so rigid, so black and white, that it leaves no space for the soul, for our actual human reality to mess up or be unsure or just be.
So it creates this horrible internal conflict when our own actions don't match up with our rigid judgments of others.
Yeah, exactly. Which naturally leads them to say, okay, we need a shift. We need to change this. How do we get out of this cage we've built out of overthinking and judgment?
And they give an example that feels quite down to earth, teaching kids to process negative emotions. Not just shushing them to make the adults feel less awkward or look like better parents, but because it's actually important for the child's own inner world. Processing feelings without being shamed or scolded for having them, it's shifting from judging the outside to understanding the inside.
Yes, exactly. Nurturing the real self, not just trying to control how things look on the surface. They also talk about being more consciously aware of what we support. What we buy, what we click on, who we associate with, that might actually be harming other people, even if we tell ourselves it's not intentional.
And then there's that very direct instruction, stop defining people, just stop.
Yeah. And crucially, the source says we need to take that discomfort we feel with uncertainty, with the unknown, and instead of running from it, we need to settle into it firmly. Why should we do that? Because, and I love this phrase, the fact that we will be uncertain is a certainty.
The certainty of uncertainty, I like that too. It flips it, doesn't it? So instead of fighting the unknown, lean into it as the one thing we can count on. And they suggest this kind of deep change doesn't happen through like big movements necessarily. It's small scale. Major change can only happen on a minor scale, one individual at a time.
Right. The transformation has to start inside each of us. And the source's final, ultimate instruction, the big takeaway is this. We have to move on from our minds and move into our hearts.
Wow, that's a powerful way to end it. And they tie it all together by suggesting that the thing that truly connects us, what makes us the same, is something our minds may never be able to understand. So instead of trying to analyze and categorize all the differences, the collateral stuff our minds get fixated on, we need to let go of some of that analysis to make room for this deeper connection that the mind alone just can't quite grasp.
It's like surrendering the idea that our intellect is the only tool, or even the best tool, for understanding what it means to be human and connected. Making space for something more fundamental, something felt, rather than just thought.
Whew. Okay. So starting with that really counterintuitive title, the source takes us through this critique of how we, as a culture, might be overusing our thinking, judging minds. They show us the consequences, how we cage ourselves and disconnect, and then they call for this pretty radical shift towards embracing uncertainty and connecting from the heart.
Yeah, it really drives home that this isn't about being switched off or unaware. Not at all. It's about seeing the limits of relying only on that constant analysis, and then consciously making space for other things. Intuition, maybe. Real connection, accepting the unknown parts of life and ourselves.
So thinking about this for you, the listener, what does this perspective make you question about your own habits of mind, how you process the world, how you interact with people who are different? What might shift for you if you tried consciously to lean into that certainty of uncertainty like the source suggests?
And thinking about that final call from the source, what might it actually look like in your own day-to-day life to try and move from your mind into your heart?
Definitely something to think about. Or maybe something to feel into.